words that simply say, you are an unceasing spiritual being with an eternal destiny in God's great universe.
I am coming to the cross. I am poor and weak and blind. I am counting all but loss. I shall full salvation find. Long my heart has sighed for thee, long has evil reigned within. Jesus sweetly speaks to me, I will cleanse you from all sin. Here I give my all to thee, friends and time and earthly store, soul and body thine to be, wholly thine forevermore. Let's sing the last one, please. I am trusting, Lord, in thee, blessed Lamb of Calvary, humbly at thy cross I bow. Save me, Jesus, save me now.
Well, that's not fair to have to get up after that. What a gift. You think for centuries when someone was gone, their voice was gone forever, and that voice is not gone. What a gift that is. I was listening not long ago to a talk that Dallas did that I had never heard before on celebration, and he taught a group of people how to sing. And he would talk about how he would just sing, and the song that he chose, it was so striking because it was for celebration, was "O Sacred Head Now Wounded." And he just, sang it with his whole body and mind and will. Soul, thank you. Gosh, Dallas Willard night. Who wouldn't just pay money to come and be a part of this, or travel from anywhere to be a part of this? I'm John Ortberg, and I get to be kind of arranging or emceeing stuff around tonight. So this is just welcome. This is just family. This is just Dallas family. Dallas used to say one of the things that we love about little children is that they have not learned to manage their face. And then when we grow up, we learn how to manage our face and use it to hide what's happening in our minds and in our wills, but little kids can't do that, and that's part of why we love them so much, is you just look at them and you know what's going on inside them. And so tonight you don't have to manage your face. We'll just be here as Dallas's family. We're so grateful to Westmont for hosting this, and the Martin Institute, and a lot of you know Gail Beebe, who's the president of Westmont, and among other things regularly visits with his friend the Pope. And so part of what we're doing tonight is to formally request that Gail seek sainthood for Dallas Willard. And as you know, you just have to have two miracles, and Dallas did. One of them is he defined inerrancy as God is well pleased with what's in the Bible. And still retained formal affiliation with Biola University, and that's a miracle. And then the other miracle is just his life. And So we get to celebrate that and remember him and think about him as part of that great cloud of witnesses that has changed probably all of us in this room. Thought we'd do this real quick just to start. Many of us will have quite vivid memories of the first time that we read something by Dallas or became aware of Dallas's existence. So just real fast, turn to the person next to you, and if you remember, when's the first time you were ever aware that there was a Dallas Albert Willard? When was that? And if not, just ask God to forgive you. But if you can remember real quick, when's the first time? So you can finish that conversation later on if you would like to, and that will bring you a lot of joy. One of the very striking characteristics of Dallas was that for him, like Jesus, the line between prayer and just talking to somebody got real thin, because there was such an awareness of the fact that God's always present. And there's a podcast and audio of a time when Dallas was at the church where I serve, and we were leading the congregation in the Lord's Prayer. And of course, his version of the Lord's Prayer is almost better than the Lord's version of the Lord's Prayer. So you can just listen to that if you want to, but if you want to join in, I think that'd be possible. So who's ever rolling the audio, go ahead and roll it.
Prayer is talking to someone. That's why Jesus always looked up in heaven when he prayed, is because that's where the one was that he was talking to. And so you start out with a formal address. Our Father, who art in heaven. Now, understand that when the Bible talks about heaven like that, it doesn't mean something that's a way off. It's talking about something that's right here around you. It's talking, in the first place, about the atmosphere. That was the first heaven in biblical terms. And so that phrase, our Father who art in heaven, you could say that our Father always near us, always present to us. Now we're standing before God. We have sought his face, as the Bible says. Hallowed be thy name. Hallowed doesn't really do much for most people, except at Halloween or the Gettysburg Address or something like that. Here's what he's saying. May your name be treasured and loved. May your name be cherished and loved. We know what it's like to do that. We cherish my little granddaughter, our little granddaughter Larissa. That name is sweet to me. I cherish it. I love it. And I don't separate it from that little girl. And the first request in the Lord's Prayer is that the name of God would be cherished and loved. Thy kingdom come. That means, may your rule be completed in my life. May what you want done in my life come right around me. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done where I am, all around me, as it is in heaven. Now you need to dwell in those phrases. Sometimes you can spend a long time just in one phrase. That's a good one to spend time in. May your will be done all around me today and day to day as it is done in heaven. How's it done in heaven? Pretty good. Wouldn't you say? Yes? And so we're inviting that to come into our lives. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us today the things we need for today. It isn't just bread. We're asking for all of our provisions, and we're trusting him for it. And very importantly, we are asking him just for today because he's going to be here tomorrow. If your children were found stuffing cornflakes into their pockets because they thought you might not provide them tomorrow, you would be worried about them, wouldn't you? That daily bread, what we need for today. I'm counting on God. Tell that to them. Forgive us our debts. debt is not doesn't say all that needs to be said there. Methodists say trespassers. Presbyterians are debtors. Trespassers. You see, those words are narrowed down for us. So I suggested, God, please forgive us for the ways we have imposed upon you, as we are forgiving everyone who imposes on us in any way. Try that on. Work it through your mind. Think about what it means. Forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. The next two lines are so simple that you find translators struggling with them often. The older versions are just quite right. Lead us not into temptation. That means keep us out of trouble. Keep us out of trouble. Deliver us from everything that's bad. Now, I hope you're not above asking that. Many people kind of feel they are. But remember, this is a prayer of a child to their father. And if you've forgotten to be a child, you need to relearn it. So you just say simply to the Father, Lord, keep us out of trouble and save us from everything. And then the grand conclusion gives the basis for the prayer, really. Because yours is the kingdom. And you might try that as, you're the one who's in charge. You're the one who's in charge. You have all the power. The glory is yours forever. And that's just the way we want it.
Gary and I used to talk periodically about what a great gift it was just to be able to ask Dallas questions. Hey, Dallas. And so he asked if I would say a few words about that for a moment. I'll start with this. I had kind of a vision where I went to heaven, and heaven was filled with hallways, and on all the halls were what looked like clocks, and everyone had a name under it, and Dallas was there, and he showed me that they're actually sinometers, and every time you sin, you have a sinometer in heaven. It gives a little tick. And so I was quite curious about this, and one of Dallas's 4 great concerns was that effective Christian spiritual formation should be empirically verifiable, and it turns out he was right. So I just walked up and down the halls of heaven to look at all of your sinometers, and I found Eugene Peterson's sinometer and watched it for about 2 minutes, and it went tick, and then another 3 minutes, and it went tick again. I saw Jan Johnson's 15 seconds tick, and another 10 seconds, another tick. I found Richard Foster's tick, 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 tick. I went all over heaven, and I saw everybody's sinometer except for one. I could not find Gary Moon's. I looked everywhere. I could not find the sinometer of Gary Moon. And so I finally asked Dallas, does this mean what I think it means? Does this mean that Gary Moon has actually experienced what John Wesley would call entire sanctification, that his heart has been so thoroughly renovated that he has no more need for a sinometer? And Dallas said, no. They keep his in the office of the other place. They're using it for a fan. Didn't really happen. That's just stupid. The afterlife is just one reality that is impossible for a lot of us to think about without thinking about Dallas. Heaven is that place where God will allow everyone who can possibly stand it, but standing it could be hard because we have a pretty big need to indulge in envy or lust. But if you do that when God is watching you, it takes all the fun out of it. And in heaven, Dallas says, God will be very hard to avoid. And I'd love to be able to ask him, Dallas, why do we call it an afterlife when it's really the fulfillment of life? And I expect he would have some alternative word for it that nobody else would have thought of, but that as soon as you heard him say it, you would chuckle and say, of course, that must be it. Why was I never taught this before? Because he was that way. And I miss him. Not like Jane or Becky or John or Larissa or Richard, who's known him for over 40 years, but like a lot of people in this room. Many who have never lived in the same house or worshiped in the same church or worked at the same school, but who found in the writings of this man a source of clarity and beauty and sense and lucidity and truth that just simply could not be found in any other voice in our day, and who found in his life, in the peace that had occupied his body, in the humility that worked just at the cellular level in him, in the way he looked at you, whoever you were, as though he found you as interesting as Stephen Hawking and N.T. Wright and Kim Kardashian and Donald Trump put together. All of us who found in his life a reason for hope even greater than could be found in his writings. There are many writers who, when you meet them, you find their actual lives are kind of disappointing. And I have met some of them, and I have been one of them. What was staggering about Dallas is, as great as the gap is between his writings and the writings of other people, sentences would just come out of him that could not come out of anybody. They just couldn't. But that gap was small compared to the gap between his life and a lot of other lives. I remember in the Divine Conspiracy reading when he would talk about what he called job discipleship. The job discipleship consists primarily of working diligently in partnership with God, and then what he called gentle non-cooperation with evil. And I used to wonder about that phrase. What is gentle non-cooperation with evil? And then it struck me one day that people did not gossip around Dallas. Gossip requires collusion. If you're going to gossip with somebody, they got to lean forward a little bit and enjoy together with you that sense of superiority that comes from being able to pray more intelligently about the gossipy. And if the other person just gently doesn't cooperate, then gossip is no fun. I know of a pastor who says that if sin isn't fun, you're not doing it right. And Dallas wouldn't do it right. And so it was no fun with him. And he understood something as powerful as evil is in a deeper way terribly fragile and terribly vulnerable and can be brought to its knees by a gentle non-cooperation. And we all felt that around him. And I miss him. There have been 1,000 questions I wish I could ask him. What do you think about this book? Or so many words now that I wonder, what do they mean? And I wish I could find out from him. And so many things have happened in my life, many of our lives. And I never get to say, hey, Dallas, about. I've gotten to know him in another way. The biography of Dallas that Gary and a lot of people in this room were a part of, I'm so grateful for. Not just his amazing thoughts and his amazing life that I knew something about, but also what he lost, what he experienced as a little boy, knowing a bit more about what he regretted or what he struggled with. By the time I knew Dallas, he seemed so sanctified, it was someplace between inspiring and discouraging. And I found myself sometimes thinking, I hope whenever Judgment Day comes, whatever that's like, I'm not standing next to him in line. Because unless God is totally invulnerable to the recency bias, I will be hosed. I have big regrets as a dad, and big regrets as a husband, and big regrets as a human being. And to know Dallas shared in those, to know it not just abstractly, but in some reality, to know that he has shared some of what I experience now gives me hope that I might yet share some of what he experienced then. I miss him. And yet my mind is so penetrated with his thoughts that I simply can't engage in the craft that I engage in, or even just live without his thoughts constantly being in my mind. And so, in a sense, in my mind, and of course our minds are the only ways that we contact reality, he is more present in a way in my life than anybody I know. So I remember in hope, which is the anticipation of good that has not yet arrived, which God alone knows the greatness of, wherefore God is the most hopeful as well as the most joyous being in the universe. I remember in hope. I had one glimpse I thought I would tell you about. I do not have the gift of mystic visions. Some people do. Dallas's life was struck by some, although he did not talk about them much. I did not. I grew up in the Midwest in a Scandinavian Baptist Midwestern church, and we were not a vision. We didn't even look other people in the eye directly. So, but not long ago in our church, we were singing about being in God's presence, about the joy of being in God's presence, and about what that will be like someday. And I wasn't expecting a thought, or maybe an image more precisely, not of seeing Jesus, but of seeing Dallas's face when Dallas saw Jesus. And there was so much wonder and energy and joy that I could hardly bear just that. Hey, Dallas, what's it like to see him? So we're enormously in debt to all of you, but particularly to Gary for remarkable work in helping us come to know Dallas better through his biography. And Richard Foster is going to interview Gary Moon. So Gary, would you come on up? And Richard, would you come on up? And can we say thank you for a gift to all of us?
If you haven't seen the book, here it is. Becoming Dallas Willard.
Before we get started, I would like to say only marshmallow questions, please.
Gary asked me, could I show him the questions ahead of time? So I gave him some phony questions. Now the real ones. First, you interviewed just a ton of people in all of this, and you went a lot of places. You spent a lot of time. We did
A lot of F's money.
Yeah. Can you give us just? Oh, sorry. Can you give us one happy moment through that all? And please, you cannot answer finishing the book.
Okay.
That doesn't count. So just,
Well, there were tons of happy moments. I mean, most everybody that knew Dallas, it was a happy encounter. Maybe everybody. I think. All right. Here's the thing. Philip Yancey has a line about the movies about Jesus in the 50s and 60s, about being Prozac Jesus, that he kind of feet don't quite touch the ground and just kind of glides through life. I think I expected that going in. I think I expected to find stories of where it's. I can imagine Dallas in church, but it would be like Jesus in the temple, and so that after the service, the deacon board and the pastors gathered around, and he's saying, "Let me explain what the kingdom really means," or things like that. So it was just him being more human. Bertha Willard, sister-in-law that for a while raised him like a mom. Stories from her of this, the Dallas who puts his hands his face in his hands and says, "You know what makes me mad is when the one that's supposed to be doing the cooking gets sick because you've just been sick." Or just our Dean, her brother, talking about Dallas herding horses and not getting them to bend to his will, and some of the ways that he would respond to that. Just the humanity.
Oh, great. Well, it's wonderful, the many, many stories you tell, and that's a sweet part, so you'll enjoy that read. Dallas was, we all know this, was so well known for these sayings, these words that, these phrases, Dallasisms that would come out.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite for yourself, and maybe a little bit why?
Just two or three quick ones. This has been a bit of a tough season as far as people. Regina's mom and dad have passed away this year. My favorite uncle. So the
Right.
one want to go to heaven, go now. Might as well go now. The thing that brings heaven closer to us, and the people that are there closer to us. Probably everything for God is a no-brainer. Every time I read a neuropsych article that hurts my head, I think, I wonder if they really understand that for God it's a no-brainer.
Great. I've got these written down here. In your interviews for the book, can you share with us a personality that surprised you?
Well, yes. But first of all, and John made reference to it. It took half the people in this room to do the biography. So, so I hate to say a person or two, but Walter.
What's his name?
Yeah. Walter Hopp, one of the 34 PhD students, teaches at a major Northeastern university, and just is becoming like a child, talking about Dallas, and that he had after Dallas passed away, he had a conversion experience, and just his desire for Dallas to have known that.
Yeah.
And on the contrast is, contrast in some ways, I bumped into a homeless person randomly who had been to the Lamplighter, the place where a restaurant Dallas often went to, and I asked him, did you know a Dallas Willard? Because he said he was at the Lamplighter every night, this homeless guy was. And he said, oh, sure. He was like Norm on Cheers. And so I didn't believe him. He had also made a claim that his nephew he was at the Lamplighter because his nephew had played in the World Series. So I didn't believe any of it. So I said, okay, so sure. So what do you remember anything from that conversation? I said, what was it about? He said, philosophy, theology, the afterlife, metaphysics. He remembered a 25-year-old conversation with Dallas, and because he said he was a philosophy major, those 4 concerns were fresh on my mind. I mentioned them to him, and I looked up, and he's crying. It's true, yeah. And he said, where were those ideas when I left the church?
Wow. Wow. That's sweet. Can you share with us a take-home for the book? This is a marketing question. You must get this book because.
Oh, I don't have that one. The things I will think about for the rest of my life are his 4 critical concerns. The time with J.P. Moreland where he goes over this. Looking back at what he wrote and realizing that virtually everything seemed to come from one of those concerns. It's just a remarkable, tight way of thinking about life. And John alluded to this, but where do you find God at theendofyourrope.com makes Dallas more approachable to me. I can relate, I can imitate.
I'm going to share just a couple of paragraphs, just so you get a taste. Now, I asked Jane's permission to share this because this is fairly not fairly, this is deeply intimate. It was a letter Dallas had written to Jane, and I wish I could take the time to read the whole letter because it's this wonderful, how do you do this in a letter? Covered his whole life in these wonderful phrases, but I wanted just the paragraph about Jane. And then, dearest Jane, there is you. You came into my life after years of my feeling rejected by grown-up women in my larger family, and then on the outside. Because I could not see or feel love from the girls my age or about, I could not respond to the ones which in retrospect I know were pathetically in love with me. There was a string of girls which extends from freshmen in high school through TTC like that. They never could understand. They were dealing with Coglia, the wooden Indian, just stands there, he's speaking of himself, as lonely as can be, and wishes he were still an old pine tree. So we, you and I, came together under the guise and protection of religion. I would never have been able to assume a love relationship between us but for that, especially since you were so beautiful and talented and popular. I know that grace has kept me thus far from hurting you even worse than I have, but also it has permitted me to be rather inhuman, counting on the religious basis of our relationship to prevail, where I didn't know what to do or didn't want to do that kind of thing. I really doubt that any woman with such wonderful qualities as yourself could have endured me without a grace even beyond their consciousness. But you have been upheld, and that fact, with all that it comes from, comes far to explain why I go on living and living with you. I want to go on living with you because you are good, as well as being pretty and smart and decent and reliable and willing to go along with the rather unusual and certainly overextended character of my life. Of all the women I know, none comes even remotely close to you in all these things together. How blessed I am that you are mine. I never lose consciousness of this fully. Enough already, but it's all true. Love, Dallas. So, you have the chance to get the book. Thank you, Gary, for an awful lot of labor in biography. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
So one of the things Dallas was really good at was being silly, and we're going to do that for the next couple of moments. So the more you enter into it, the more fun it will be, because the guy who's agreed to play the role of Alex Trebek in Dallas Jeopardy is a philosophy professor at Westmont named Mark Nelson, and he's a very humor-challenged guy. So could you try to make him feel really at home? Mark Nelson.
Welcome to Dallas Jeopardy. Tonight we have a full selection of magnificent competitors. So please welcome first a philosopher and part-time Lutheran from Valparaiso, Indiana, Aaron Preston. And a philosopher and freelance raccoon hunter from La Mirada, California, Greg Tenelzoff. A philosopher, and, well, it's difficult to explain. I understand from my notes, he's developing a line of hair care products with Richard Foster. Steve Porter. Steve has had a pulled a hamstring, so he won't be participating this evening. Finally, or next, a covenant pastor and itinerant hockey referee from Minnesota, Keith Meyer. And finally, a Willard family member and student from Moore Park, California, and I'm told she's being scouted as a place kicker for USC. It is Larissa Heatley. Now, you philosophers, you must have had some funny experiences in your work. You couldn't make that up. Now, come on up.
Stand here.
Stand there. Now, we are going to proceed according to the usual Jeopardy format. There will be questions. There will be answers. We do not have buzzers, but the generosity of the Martins has extended to a cowbell. So if you know the answer, give the cowbell a ring. Now, Keith, in your line of work, I assume you've had lots of interesting experiences as well.
Sure.
Great. Now, our first category will be philosophy facts. Now, for $200, whatever success I have, I owe to this man. Aaron.
Who is Bill Hay?
That is correct. Bill Hay was Dallas's dissertation chair at University of Wisconsin. For $400, the four concerns that drove Dallas's academic life and also his ministry, and before anybody answers, do not use words that a normal person can understand. Aaron again.
That would be realism, epistemic, and ontological or metaphysical, biblical anthropology, and empirically testable results.
That's an excellent verbose choice. Now, next, for $600, just like Harry Potter. Aaron again.
That would be Dallas's office at USC, under the stairs.
That is correct. Dallas lived under the stairs of Mudd Hall for more than a decade. Later, he moved to number 4 Privet Drive, Little Whinging, Surrey. Next question. For $800, classroom vices, 2 for the price of 1. Aaron again.
Rum-dipped crook cigars.
That is correct, though I have to say I'm surprised that you, as a professing Christian, would know that. Next question. Academic sibling to Edmund Husserl and the other famous student of Franz Brentano. Larissa? No. Oh. Why, Aaron?
Yes. Oh. Who is Sigmund Freud?
That is correct. Big round of applause for Aaron. Fantastic. Yes, our contestants are being
Sigmund
reminded to
Freud.
speak into the mic whenever possible. And now, our next category, it's ministry musings. For 200 points, and most of these have to do with religious things. Now, first question, not for superheroes. Reverend Meyer.
What is discipleship not for only for super Christians?
Well, the judges have said we will accept that. I'm translating from the German. What is discipleship for super Christians only? This was Dallas's first publication in a major Christian periodical appearing in Christianity Today, October 10, 1980. I'm sure
Thank you.
most of you knew that. Now, next question. Fear of non-existence. Keith Meyer.
What is the reason John Ortberg never argued with Dallas?
That is correct. It is well known that fear of non-existence is a long-time preoccupation of John Ortberg. Isn't that correct? And it goes back to the time you were bitten by a rabid existentialist.
I wish I didn't exist right now.
Next question for 600. The question of every evangelist should be this. Reverend Meyer, you're on a roll.
If you don't die tonight, what will you do tomorrow?
That is correct. Next question for 800. An interactive relationship. Why, Reverend Meyer?
What is knowledge?
Could you be a little more verbose? Well, the judges have made some gestures or other, and so I'm interpreting that as, yes, we will count that. What knowledge always is in reference to. I'm surprised you didn't get that.
Just a pastor. That's all I am. I'm just a pastor.
For 1,000, quote, he'll let anyone in who can stand that much love. Reverend Meyer.
What were Dallas's views on his office hours?
That is correct. Now, we're on to our third category, family matters. For 200. Quote, I hate it, but it helps me get that darn husserl.
I know one.
Larissa.
What is his mustache?
That is correct. For 400, the cookie duster.
What is the name for said mustache?
Correct again. For 600 points, he didn't want to show off.
What is the reason he never levitated in public?
For 800, irresistible evangelism.
What is the reality of giving them heaven?
Excellent answer. And finally, for 1,000 points, Larissa.
Who is me? The grandchild of Dallas.
Judges? All right. Now on to our fourth category, musical notes. All of the answers are something to do with Dallas and music. For 200, it's a banjo. It's a banjo. Larissa?
What he wanted to learn how to play?
We will accept that. The correct answer is, or the full answer is, the musical instrument Dallas plans to learn to play in heaven. For 400, take out the papers and the trash. That is, or what is, the song that Dallas often sang while taking out the papers and the trash. For 600, the Firestone Hour. They really are disappointing. Now, the answer is, what Dallas's favorite musical program on the radio was when he was at Tennessee Temple. As most of you will know, this began broadcasting on NBC in 1928 and later on ABC until 1963. Of course. For 800 points, Justin Bieber. Ooh, very close. The correct answer is, who was Dallas's favorite singer? And it's hardly unsurprising, given that Justin Bieber's early single, One Less Lonely Girl, is based entirely on Husserl's 1900 treatise, Logische Untersuchungen, erster Teil. Larissa, I'm guessing you must be kicking yourself right now. For 1,000 points, Our Prayer. Larissa.
What is my grandparents' wedding song?
That is correct. Ooh, big applause. That is the title of the song Dallas wrote for his and Jane's wedding. Our fifth category, planes, trains, and automobiles. For 200, Greasy Creek. Greasy Creek. Greasy. Greasy.
The song Dallas sang while washing the dishes.
That's good. That was good.
That is incorrect. But I think we should give him 200 pity points. The correct answer is, what is the place where Dallas got baptized? For 400, Lake Louise, Georgia. Lake Louise, Georgia. And of course, this is where Dallas and Jane spent their honeymoon. For 600, the place where Dallas became overwhelmed by beauty and joy, apart from Lake Louise, obviously. The answer is Port Elizabeth, South Africa. For 800, the Archbishop of Canterbury. The Archbishop of Canterbury. was the person who interrupted a conversation between Dallas and James Catford in real life. Finally, for 1,000 points, what are Bermuda shorts, wingtips, and brown socks?
What are his favorite casual wear after a long day of travel?
Another 2,000 points for Larissa. Finally, this next category requires some explanation. While most of you know that Dallas was a fearsome basketball player during his time at Tennessee Temple, not so many people know, at least what Gary Moon tells me, of Dallas's reputation as a trash talker on the basketball court. Apparently his trash talking was so psychologically devastating that it made Dennis Rodman blush and single-handedly ruined Charles Barkley's golf swing. Anyway, for this category, we will dispense with the usual answer question format, and contestants will simply identify Dallas Willard's favorite trash-talking phrase on that topic. For 200, determinism and trash talk. The answer we were looking for is, your will ends here. For 400, eternal security and trash talk. Anyone? The answer we're looking for is, you are not perfectly safe in my universe. For 600, the body, formation, and trash talk. Anyone? The answer is indirection. You call that indirection? Let me posterize you with some indirection. And Larissa, I'm surprised you didn't get that. For 800, biblical literacy and trash talk. Aaron.
Inerrancy means God is well pleased with what's in the Bible.
It's so close. Yeah. It's inerrancy means God is so well pleased with what's in the Bible. Chump. But we will accept that.
Yeah.
Finally, the kingdom and trash talk. The kingdom. The answer we were looking for is, hey ref, how long are you going to let this bum camp out in my kingdom? Now, it's been neck and neck between these competitors, but I've just received a message from Gary Moon that because of a computer glitch, we haven't been keeping score. So the outcome of the game will depend entirely on what happens in Final Jeopardy. So, are we ready for Final Jeopardy? Richard Foster's greatest fear when rooming with Dallas. Excellent. Okay, so, Aaron, Richard Foster's greatest fear when rooming with Dallas.
What is that Dallas would challenge him to a game of basketball and trash talking?
Keith.
That if he didn't die, he'd have to be with him the next morning. How's that?
Larissa.
What is that my grandpa would cut off Richard's ponytail?
That is the correct answer. Now, finally, after Final Jeopardy, our scores are as follows. Larissa is in first place with $10,800. Greg, I'm sorry to say, beg your pardon, Aaron, I'm sorry to say, has minus $413. And curiously, Reverend Keith Meyer has somehow arrived at 60,000 Italian lira. And unfortunately, as these have not been legal tender since 2002, he gets 0 points and will be prosecuted for fraud. Larissa, as our winner, you will receive a signed copy of Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline. And losers, Keith and Aaron, will receive 2 signed copies. Join me in thanking our competitors.
You know, we often mistakenly think eternal life is something that begins later. But eternal life is now. It is eternal living. Now, what exactly does that mean? It simply means that living moment by moment, our lives are caught up in God's life. And by that I mean what God is doing, and in particular what God is doing where you are and where you're going to be. We always have to remember that we live at the cross-section of 2 landscapes. One of those landscapes is visible. The other is invisible. And as we build upon Christ, where we wind up in our lives, we do want to keep in mind that even though it may seem like quite an ordinary place, God is there. God is here. That's the heart of the invisible landscape. Take the things that Jesus said, put them into practice, and you will certainly fail. And then you will learn, and as you go, gradually your life will be one with the life of Christ. Being with Him and Him with us becomes a tangible fact in our life as our life progresses. I like the words that simply say, you are an unceasing spiritual being with an eternal destiny in God's great universe. Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, that is who you are. And as you seize that truth and put it into practice, you are living eternally in the moment.
Gary wanted me to let you know, if you order those conversations now, at the end of each one, there's a little snippet of Mark Nelson doing Dallas Jeopardy. And Mark also wanted you to know he's available for a small fee for wedding receptions and birthday parties. So we're going to shift now to some tributes, and they'll just come one right after another. Greg Jessen, first of all, representing philosophy, and then Jan Johnson for ministry, James Catford, Renovaré, and then Becky representing the family. And then we'll move right into that to an audio of Dallas giving that great blessing from the Old Testament from Aaron. So, Greg, if you'd come, and then one after another, the tributes, and then Dallas giving that blessing.
It was many years ago that I had come out from the Midwest to visit the Willards, work at their home, try to organize Dallas's library, clear brush. In the evening, we often watched movies together. And I would choose a movie, or Jane would choose a movie. Or this one evening, Dallas chose a movie. And it was called My Dinner with Andre. And the whole movie is about two men in a restaurant just talking back and forth. And most of it is completely incomprehensible and absurd and ridiculous. And Jade and I were just so flabbergasted, and we're, Dallas, this is just crazy. And Jane was laughing, and I was laughing, and I was laughing because Jane was laughing, and she was laughing because I was laughing. And of course, Dallas just loved to watch us, just like so puzzled. Why are we watching this movie? One thing about all of my visits to the Willards family the Willards home over 3 decades, there was always a lot of laughter. At the end of the movie, I said to Dallas, this was a complete waste of time. And he said the most interesting thing that I have never forgotten. He said, Greg, you know that people lined up for blocks and blocks to see this movie? What do you think they were looking for? I met Dallas almost 40 years ago. I was a student at UCLA in philosophy and really grappling with the serious questions and getting pretty beat up by my professors. And I asked Dallas, I had known him through a friend, Randy Neal, who was a graduate student at USC, and I asked Dallas, could we get together and talk? And it was on a Halloween night, and Dallas said, well, I've got to go down to Newport Beach to speak. If you want, you can come with me. And we drove down to Newport Beach together. We stopped at a McDonald's, had dinner, and we talked. And he helped me so much. And next time I asked, he said yes. And I often wondered, why me? Why did I get to be able to know him so well? And the answer is so simple. Because I asked, and he almost always said yes. And it just struck me that that indicates so much about the way God is. If you ask, the answer is almost always yes. There was once I came to the Willards' house, and there was a dog on the front porch. And I said, oh, did you buy a dog? And Dallas, in this kind of nonchalant way, said, no, it just kind of wandered up here, and I guess it liked it, so it just stayed. And that was so much of what it meant to have a relationship with Dallas. If you just show up, you can stay. How would I have ever been able to guess that this man would continually say yes to me over the decades? As a teacher, as a pastor, as a counselor, as a mentor, as a friend, as a brother, providing me with the most compelling example of what it means to be a disciple of Jesus Christ. How could I have ever known? Now, I need to say something philosophical, and I'll only say one thing. The key to all of Dallas's philosophical work that then translates into his religious work is that the mind is not encapsulated, trapped, enclosed within itself. And he studied this for decade after decade after decade. The structure of the mind is that it is primarily outward directed. The mind is, like Aristotle says, like the hand. It reaches out and grabs things. And now this is so important that one does not get trapped within their own thoughts. They are open to the world. They are open to the adventure of their lives, as Dallas used to like to say. And so as the mind turns outwards and moves out into the world, what did he find? He found a physical universe. He found wonderful, magical people. He discovered duties and obligations to those people. He discovered a moral order. C.S. Lewis thought that was the single most important fact in human existence, a moral order. Dallas further discovered the stunning person of Jesus, who himself announces another reality out in the world, the kingdom of God, as it is unfolding and growing and multiplying in the world. And what does that lead us to? An invitation to live our lives with God, to become disciples, to become apprentices, to become students and friends of Jesus. An RSVP, if you will, an invitation. The clues for God's unfathomable love and redemption are everywhere. We just need to be encouraged to see them clearly for what they are. And that's what Dallas did with his life. Dallas Willard accomplished with his life just what he desired to do. Of course, we miss him terribly. The experience of missing a loved one is a small clue that we were made for eternity. In the words of John Bunyan, he was so valiant for truth that it is inconceivable that he is gone. In 1947, C.S. Lewis wrote a similar thought in his preface to Essays presented to Charles Williams. And Lewis said, "No event in my life has so corroborated my faith in the next world, as Williams did simply by dying. When the idea of death and the idea of Williams thus met in my mind, it was the idea of death that was changed. As I am constantly confronted with the disastrous options in this world, I am continually reminded of that question that Dallas asked me. Greg, what do you think all of those people were looking for? And that's what he spent his life showing.
I've been asked to comment on being his friend and ministry partner. What was it like to be his friend and his ministry partner? Dallas was the kind of friend who would call and leave a message on your phone and say, "I was thinking about you today," and then he would say something like, "And I'm praying for your power in the kingdom today." And you listen to the message and you go, "Well, okay then, I guess I'm ready for anything." And then you'd play it a few more times and keep it there because there's going to be a time you're going to need that. He always thought, and I think many of you in this room experienced this, he always thought we were better than we were. He would say things to me like he'd say, "Now, Jan, I know that you will be," whatever it was. Or, "Jan, I know that you can do this." And I'd be standing there going, "I'm not that. I can't do that." What is he thinking? But because he said it, and because he said it to me, I was that. And I did that because he said that. I was explaining that to Becky a few weeks ago, and she said, "Jan, do you think that he meant that, or was he just trying to encourage you?" And you know, I've thought about that, and I finally came up with an answer. I think that he knew that I was halfway there, and he thought, all I got to do is tell her this, and she'll move ahead. That was his way of making sure that it would happen. And that style of friendship is so contagious, and I think a lot of you have probably picked that up from him. And now you're the kind of person that says, "You know, I really think that you can do this." Because that's what he was like. And we all need mature people to see in us what only God sees. That's what Dallas showed us, and that's what we can do for others. As a friend, I got to say, he was terrible at stealing the dinner check. And he was always good at finding a quiet enough table to where you could have a real conversation. He was a great conversationalist. Sometimes it went off into beekeeping, and I never knew how we got there. Another time I remember, Jane, I don't know where you are, but I remember one time the four of us were eating, and Dallas and I got off on the demise of the semicolon. And we were really grieved over this, and Jane and my husband were like, "Well then, okay, we'll move on to something else," and I don't know what's wrong with them, you know, and then we went on to non-restrictive clauses and all that kind of thing. So as a ministry partner, he was such a model for me. The first 4 days of the 2-week Fuller class, he would always fast. That was a way for him to lean on God, and it followed his idea, and Keith, I know you know this saying well, do your best, but never trust your best. So he did his best. He prepped every time he spoke. He re-prepped. It was never the same thing he said somewhere else. And before the Fuller class, he would say to me, "I have a better idea about how to explain this." And he had been working on it. Every person mattered. Every event mattered. This was never a do-over for him. And what was interesting is that when I was leading sometimes, though, I thought that maybe he was checking out, because I would be leading Lexio or whatever, and his head would be down, and I would think, "Oh my gosh, he doesn't agree with what I'm saying. He doesn't know how to say," and and all that. And then all of a sudden, he'd lift his head and he'd say just the right thing. I was trying to reinforce that "O ye of little faith" was not a put down, but actually an encouragement, and this crowd was not getting it. And all of a sudden, he looked up and he goes, "You're almost there. You're getting it. That's what Jesus was saying." And I went, "Yes." Another time, and this gets to what you were saying, John, about the look on his face. We had just done John 13, and where Jesus washes the disciples' feet, and I wasn't sure if he was like paying attention or asleep or what. And so then I asked him at the end, "Well, what stood out to you?" And he looked up, and he had that look on his face, and he goes, "Jesus' head was so big. It was like Mr. Clean." And Dallas was just talking to me like a 5-year-old, and I was just like, "Oh, gee," and then I had to sit down and read the passage and do that again. As a ministry partner, most of the time, in study guides and devotional books, he would tell me, "Jan, just take it and run with it." He told me, "I don't even know why someone would need a study guide to the divine conspiracy." And I thought, okay, well. But when I was updating Hearing God, and Cindy's in here, she may remember this, I was trying to update it, and I explained to him that I might shorten a few sentences because some of his sentences were 60 words long. When I explained that, I'll never forget the eyebrow raised, and he said, "Faulkner is not Hemingway." And I was like, oh, gee, Jan, don't shorten any of those sentences. So I told Cindy, you should have hired a ruthless editor, not his friend. But most of all in ministry, he invested in people. He was radically available to students, to audiences. He was never just the speaker or the teacher. When you stood in line to talk to him, he didn't see anybody else around you. He just saw you. He never looked beyond you. The first time I had a conversation with him, he said something to me that became a game changer for my whole life. The second time I talked to him, we were standing there, and then he said, you know, I saw you when you first walked in. And I thought, really? You remember people that well? He taught me that. And then finally, I just wanted to say this about him. In George Eliot's book, Middlemarch, when Will is describing Dorothea, he said this, and this describes Dallas. When one sees the perfect, complete, mature person, one never thinks of their attributes. One is conscious only of their presence. And that's what he was, that magnificent presence that made you want to keep listening.
I've been scrabbling around in the Willard's collection of papers with the family and Becky and Bill. And one of the things I found was a handwritten piece of a joke that he had and he enjoyed. Interesting, he was writing out, jokes. It's quite interesting to have spotted it. And it's this. A guy goes into a restaurant and asks for coffee and says, without cream. And the guy behind the bar goes off and he comes back and says, I'm terribly sorry, sir, we don't have any cream. Would you mind having it without something else? Now, I'm told that has a whole introduction to a big piece of his intellectual thought, but it's beyond me to work that out. In Renovaré circles, there's so many things that have been important to us, and many other people here from Renovaré ought to be standing here. 4 areas: his ability to relate and the relational, capital that he brought, we all understand. His ability to do so many things. But his real interest, his physical capital, his ability to bring physical capital to us. What I mean by that is he simply showed up. He really contributed to us. I mean, he spoke everywhere. He spoke on behalf of Renovaré and other places too, of course, but he toured. We had the conferences all over the United States. He showed up and spoke, in season and out of season. If Richard was having a break, he'd step in. Never too afraid to go anywhere, both in here in the States, but also overseas around the world. I mean, it's an image I have of him sitting in the cheap seats on the aeroplane in the 3-seater row, and there he is, this fairly chunky guy holding a bag, sitting in the middle seat. He just got out there. He did the circuit, the Renovaré Institute. He stayed with us very often, and he'd go into his little room, and we'd wonder, what is he doing in there? I mean, he wasn't preparing the talk he was about to give, because it was much the same talk you've heard him give. He was preparing himself. He was preparing the people he was going to be speaking to. It was incredibly hard to get him to eat when he came and stayed. Why? Because he liked to fast before he spoke. We used to call him the cheese professor because sometimes it was the only thing we could get him to just have a little cheese and a little more cheese. His physical contribution to us was considerable. His intellectual, we all understand that. The last time I heard him, he was at a Renovaré team time. We knew he was ill. He was about to go to hospital. And I happened to be the last person out. I don't know how that was, but the place we were in, he'd been scrawling on the board in that incredibly remarkable handwriting that sloped off the board. And as everybody else had gone, I reflected on the words that were up on the screen. Actually, I took the piece of paper, wondering whether this was the last time I was going to see him. I just pulled it off and took it away. And on it was the words, "Everything you know about salvation is probably wrong." Which was the classic educator's ploy to make you go, well, I'm going to find something that's right. And you go through and check. He was so keen. And I've often wondered what he would say to us, what the things he would say to us. And I just wonder whether one of the many things he would say is keep your intellectual curiosity. My fear is that in our being very honouring of him in the past, we set him in aspic, and we stop doing that intellectual piece. I just offer that as a possible thing he might say to us. The ability to relate, community, in some ways, Renovaré was his church, not completely, of course, but the little church in the bigger church. He was available and vulnerable in that environment. And finally, the spiritual capital he brought was extraordinary. The charismatic stream is something he really did believe in and swam in. Charismatics come in all shapes and sizes, and you get a bit like spring water. You get the slightly sparkling spring water, and you get the full sparkling spring water, and he was the full sparkling version. I remember him coming to a conference I was organising, a charismatic conference. It was a wacky time, and we had a ministry time at the end, and virtually everybody was up at the front. And not my style, but there was a lot of, remarkable things going on. People were shaking and falling, and all sorts of things were going on. Didn't make any difference to him. He just came up and he prayed within. It was just the way he'd pray anywhere else. A homeless person who we've been working with, alcoholic, gambler, came up. We had prayed for this guy for years and years and years. And he comes up at the front. I'm thinking, of all the people Dallas gets, is him. And Dallas just prayed, and something remarkable happened. This guy had the most overwhelming sobbing and crying and something, and Willard afterwards said something really did happen there. I love his ability to press into the Spirit, and a challenge to us all. So the physical capital, the intellectual capital, the relational capital, and spiritual capital. We miss him all, but we're glad to have had that experience. Thank you very much.
Many people have asked me what it was like to grow up in the home of Dallas Willard, or what he was like as a father. The first words that often come to mind include fun, humble, silly, generous, joyful, rustic, capable, hopeful, and teacher. He loved nature, he loved animals, he loved children, and he loved small, cute things. He especially loved lambs, he said, because he loved how they jumped down the hill on all fours. And he loved working in our yard. He loved to build things, and he confessed to enjoying, once it was built, how he would stand back and just look at it. And he loved music. He loved singing, and he was whistling all the time. The first song that we opened with tonight, I still remember him leading that at Woodlake Avenue at the church that Richard was pastoring when I was very small, and singing that around the house frequently. He loved hymns. The fun, silly things were simple. Like when I was little, we would skip together. And this was usually in a parking lot on the way into a store. And I remember how loud the sound was of his keys and his change jingling in his pocket, because that was right at the level of my ear. And he seemed so big, skipping along next to me. And then there were the times when I was upset when I was little, and he would come and sit down next to me. And to cheer me up, he would tell me a story that started out with, when I was a little girl. When he talked about his own childhood, it was usually fun stories about siblings or animals on the farm or raising crops. And he enjoyed teaching me and my brother how to do things the way he had learned them on the farm. I remember feeling very big and important at one point when he took me out in the backyard, and he had been working in the dirt with a hoe, and he had made several rows, these long trenches about 4 inches deep. And he asked me to hold out my little hands, and he very carefully poured some seeds into my hands. And then he instructed me on how to very carefully place those seeds in those ditches exactly this far apart, and then we very carefully covered it over with the dirt. And he was so sweet and gentle and showing me exactly how you do this, and sharing part of his childhood with me, and it was very sweet. He was always teaching like that. When I was a teenager, we moved into the realm of music, and so we'd be driving along and we'd be logically analyzing songs. So, if only the good die young, does that mean that if you are good, you will die young? And in that time period, there was lots to work with out there on the radio. We had Imagine, and we had Dust in the Wind, and then there were TV commercials. So periodically, I'd hear things like, "So Becky, if you buy that beer, a lovely young lady will come and lay across the hood of your car." And you'll probably be surprised that the first time I heard the phrase, "What would Jesus do?" it was coming from the lips of Dallas Willard. And I was in high school, and there was some kind of teenage drama happening, and he told me about that book. And so I read in his steps, and I learned to think about what would Jesus do. Between the two of my parents, they could fix or make almost anything. Dad was a big do-it-yourselfer, and the do-it-yourselfness carried over to my house as well. We, about 12 years ago, our old roof began to leak, and as soon as we told him about it, he was making plans to put a new roof on our house. So he told us which shingles to order, how to have them delivered so the truck would have the conveyor belt right up onto the roof. And then he had our whole family, other than my mom, up on the roof, including 5-year-old Larissa. And he had special areas where she could work, and he was looking after her, and it was very sweet. It was very fun. But he was going to do that roof. Nobody else was going to do that roof. And after a couple days of this, Bill and I were very stiff and sore, and Dad was just still going. And Bill said something to Dad about, "How do you keep going like that?" And his answer was simply, "Well, I come from old peasant stock." That's all we got. Near the end of 1999, I began working for my dad as a part-time ministry assistant. The Divine Conspiracy had been published the year before, and he had begun to get a lot of speaking invitations, and there was a lot of correspondence to deal with, and it had gotten beyond what he and Mom could handle just, on the side. And he had also begun thinking that he should probably organize his old papers and set up some files, because he thought maybe people were starting to take an interest in his work. And so coming in at that point in time was really like trying to fix a flat tire on a car that's moving. We didn't have time to focus on the old stuff because there was so much new stuff coming in. But we tried. The new stuff, he was thinking of them, he said, as planes coming in for landing. So he would focus on the one that was about to land and getting all that done. And he was in the back of his mind thinking about the next two coming in. And he spent years working like that. And kind of he liked to fly, so he kind of enjoyed that analogy, I think. Let's see, I'm losing track of where I left off here. So, and working with him in that setting was wonderful for me in learning his way of dealing with people in a business setting. He was so gracious and honest with the people that he dealt with. There was an email that really struck me. He had missed a deadline, and he sent a very short email to this person, and he said, "There's nothing for it. I have no excuse. I just didn't get it done." And it struck me because we all would send an excuse, and he didn't. And I thought, well, in the divine conspiracy, that's what he says to do. You just say it. You don't manage it. And it was neat to see, you practice what you preach, right? And so there were lots of neat lessons in there for me like that. And Dad was teaching us until the very end. His last months were a big, beautiful illustration of kindness and joy and hope in the midst of struggle. He expressed deep gratitude to all the people who were helping him during that time. And many times during that 9-month battle with cancer, he would say, "I just hope I'm learning what God wants me to learn." And I would keep thinking, I just hope I can become the kind of person that can handle the ups and downs in life the way my dad has. So if the main thing God gets out of your life is the person you become, I couldn't have possibly found a better role model to follow in the way of Christ.
At Numbers 6:24 through 26, you have the great Aaronic blessing. This is a blessing which Moses instructed his brother Aaron to place on the people of Israel. And thank God for it. And when you try to improve on it, you realize probably you're not going to make much headway. So let's look at this blessing and think about its content. Here's what it says. God bless you. Now that means God bring good constantly into your life. God bless you. And keep you. That means God protect you. God build around you His safekeeping. The blood of Jesus, the Spirit of Christ be over you and keep you. And it's good to study this with the Lord's Prayer and with other parts of the Bible. But God bless you and keep you. Now, stop for a moment and just think about saying that to someone. If possible, look them in the eyes. And this is a very intimate, and as I say, it can be threatening. And I've done this with groups where people broke out in crying and broke out in laughing because it touches so deeply. So just think now about saying to another person, looking in their eyes, God bless you and keep you. Underline you. I mean you. This needs to be very personal. God bless you and keep you. God make His face to shine upon you. You know, there's so much about the face of God in the Bible. And one of the most precious things that we can have is living before the shining face of God. Now, if you have trouble with the shining face, find a grandparent somewhere and watch their face shine on their grandchild. And that'll kind of give you a little idea. There is such radiance that comes out of the person with the shining face. And you know, your face is meant to shine. Glory is something that is meant to be shared from God to human beings, and glory always shines. It always shines. And now you are asking that God's shining face would be over the person you're talking to. Make his face to shine upon you. Be gracious unto you. The Lord be gracious unto you. Gracious means the flow of love and his activity in creating what is good. Be gracious unto you. So again, you don't hurry. You just go meditatively over it. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you. That's another interesting language drawn from how we relate to one another as persons. To lift up, it means something like, may the Lord look right at you personally. Lift up his countenance upon you. The manifest presence of God is basically what this is about, the manifest presence of God. We know that God is present everywhere, but he's not manifest everywhere. And the invocation, the blessing here, is designed to project that presence of God in a manifest way to the person you're talking to. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Now, peace comes in the presence of God. And to have God's shining face over you and to have him looking to you. The psalm says, the Lord's ears are open to the righteous. His eyes are open to the righteous. His ears are open to their cry. To live in that atmosphere is what we're asking for a blessing. We're asking for an entire atmosphere of God's reality to be present on this person that we are blessing under the invocation of God.
We're going to close with a song that was very, very precious to Dallas. And then InterVarsity wanted you to know Gary is going to be at a table, I think, in the back and over here. Okay, outside. So if you don't have a copy of that book, he will sign it, and would love doing that, and it's well worth getting. Just take a moment right now and reflect on Dallas and thank God that he thought up somebody like Dallas. And then we got to learn from him.
Lead kindly light amidst encircling gloom. Lead thou me on. The night is dark and I am far from home. Lead thou me on. Keep thou my feet, I do not ask to see the distant scene one step enough for me. I was not ever thus, nor prayed that thou shouldst lead me on. I never chose and see the path, but thou lead thou me on. I loved the garish day in spite of fears. Pride ruled my will, remember not past years. So long thy power hath blessed me, sure it still will lead me on, o'er moor and fen, or crag and torrent, till the night is gone, and with the morn those angel faces smile, which I have loved long since and last a while. Meantime along the narrow rugged path thyself hast trod, lead, Savior, lead me home in childlike faith, home to my God, to rest forever after earthly strife, in the calm light of everlasting life, in the calm light of everlasting life.
Now receive the benediction. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face, lift his countenance upon you, and give you peace, both now and forever. Amen. Have a great night.